Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Meeting Hill. Today we're going to have a bit of a panel guided by ourselves, talking about the works that we've made and give you a bit of insight as to why we made them, how we made them, and, I guess the stuff that came before and the stuff that might come after in regards to another Kudos show that we are hoping to have in the near future. So with me today is the rest of the Origin crew. We got Alvin
Hello.
and Jane, who's here, and and Callum
Yep. Hello.
and Jordan.
Hello.
Awesome. How are you guys doing? How's everybody?
Good.
Too
Yeah,
bad.
I'm all right.
Only all right.
Yeah, I was testing out some jokes earlier, but the people I with didn't appreciate it. They didn't appreciate my jokes.
How are you feeling? Are you feeling better? You were sick before, right?
Yeah, I've improved drastically.
Nice. That's the best. It's sort of improvement, drastic
Yeah,
improvement.
yeah. But I'm guessing I still sound a little nasally. Is that correct?
I
Yeah,
put it down to your microphone.
you sound
No?
okay.
No. Oh, okay, good. Because I know I was very, very nasally when Deb was being interviewed.
Yeah, it actually sounds a lot better than yeah. The actual quality sounds better.
Oh,
Don't know what
oh,
that is.
okay. Maybe it's just something to do with the tech, perhaps. But yeah, I'm
Cool.
much.
Hey, just quickly, Alvin, do you want to mute Facebook?
Yes, sorry, I just closed it.
No, you're okay.
What's going on?
I guess we should start with maybe discussing why we made Origin virtual and kind of the point of it all, and maybe give a bit of an insight as to how it came about. If anyone wants to start, Alvin, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So Origin Virtual was basically uh, if you had visited the site, we're pretty upfront about it, but I'm sure it's quite obvious to everyone who is listening what happened and how come it did happen. But coronavirus really impacted our initial plans. So we were actually supposed to have a physical exhibition at Kudos Gallery that kind of just couldn't happen because of the circumstances, which is all fine. I mean, we understand that it's necessary. Um, so I guess as a form of reparation, Kudos Gallery allowed us to have a digital exhibition. Um, and basically that was the starting point. When we were offered this online space, we kind of had to have a discussion about, all right, how are we going to bring all the works that we had initially planned for our physical exhibition now into this virtual space. So that was a really interesting discussion that we had to have with everyone here, and then also with Kieran. Um, we we had a few. I think we had a few physical meetups or online Discord calls before discussing what we could make and the limitations of the project before we actually got to speak with Kieran. Is that right, Patrick?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think after we spoke with Kieran, we had a better idea of the scope of what was happening. But I think one of the main things we discussed, and I think Callum really brought this idea to the table, was that we really wanted to kind of almost break the mold when it comes to the virtual space, because we were kind of not super satisfied with how a lot of people were bringing their content into the digital format. Um, yeah, I think we had one night where we were looking at a whole bunch of examples, and we were kind of like, yeah, this is good, but I think we can do better.
Yeah, there was something about a lot of the kind of current examples, which, I guess they're kind of trying to accommodate for all mediums, and so the format takes place of a gallery, like a physical gallery, and that's totally fine. But we just felt like, considering the technology was there, it didn't really feel like we should commit to conventional forms, especially when you're using a not so conventional platform to
Yeah,
exhibit that kind of work.
yeah, 100%. And I think maybe that's a testament to perhaps some of Deb's practice, which kind of looks at like how uh, some curators or spaces don't have that ability to facilitate um, more groundbreaking or perhaps unconventional media arts. So I think we wanted to take it upon ourselves to kind of break apart the typical gallery going experience as well. And I think, yeah, this was kind of like a good iteration of how we can break the traditions of a gallery. Because I think we were since the beginning we've always been about that. How can we break? How can we change the ideas around exhibiting, around media arts? How can it be looked at?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I guess that's why how Origin started in the first place, right? For anyone who is tuning into this, you know, we as Origin, kind of how Origin came about was Alvin and I had an exhibition last year at Good Space that was like a way to show our works for one night only, our 3D prints that we had pitched together. And I know personally I was super underprepared. I was really busy and didn't really have much ready to go, and we didn't really get to test anything, and I hadn't formatted my images right, and I was really unhappy with it. Alvin's work looked great, but I guess what I was craving was like
Both your works were great.
oh, thank you.
I remember you were super stressed though.
Yeah, it was,
It
I
wasn't
think
just the time.
we just we were in a position where we kind of missed that scope of uni where we could collaborate with each other and bounce ideas off each other and iterate and work on stuff. We were also like, I guess, a bit annoyed by the fact that, well, I know I was anyway, that um, when it comes to fine arts works, it's kind of normal to show stuff in progress. But when it comes to media artwork, particularly interactive work, people expect it to be working and done and that it responds well with audiences. And the standard is a much higher scope for what a ready work looks like. And so I guess in some ways there was that urge to like create a space where people could just show stuff that they're working on and have exhibitions and stuff they're working on and try new things. And like if it doesn't work, that's okay. And so I think it's kind of interesting because I think that has permeated through what we've been making, right? Is stuff that's like new and interesting and different and might not work, perfectly or to the original concept. Maybe there's like hardware limitations or some things have to be sacrificed, but like all of that is okay, and that's part of the development of media arts and working towards something that's you know uh, a contemporary future that is encouraging for people to jump into. So yeah,
Yeah,
this kind of feels like an extension of that in some ways.
yeah, 100%. And I guess also this virtual show is definitely I don't know if extension is the right word, but maybe it's kind of like a stepping stone to what we initially had planned because we were given the option of kind of making. I think with this sort of setup, a lot of artists were like, "Oh, we were originally going to show the physical form of it, but then we'll with painting and drawings, they can sort of scan it in, and then it's similar. They can take photos of the object and post it online. A lot of people were given the option of, oh, you can do whatever you want, and we were kind of the of the mindset that no, we don't really want to port our works over that we were initially having for our physical exhibition. We'd actually rather approach this as kind of like a prelude or like a warm up to the actual thing, which is now expected to happen in September.
Yeah.
Um, so, and that's also like a good launching place to observe all of our works, and the virtual space kind of has more permission to test and iterate because it's just so much more free.
Yeah, totally.
It's more free in some sense that it's more accessible because people can access on their phones and on their computers. But I'd argue that people's mindsets when they're approaching a screen device is actually more closed and much harder to work with because when you're presenting people with like some of our artworks involve 3D, like Callum's has a 3D gallery. Meeting Hill is also like a virtual space. People think, oh, is this a game? It's
Yeah.
actually really hard to break people out.
Yeah.
And even with my work, it's using pretty groundbreaking neural nets, but because of the fact that it's confined to a browser, the performance is not great. And
Mhm.
people expect things on the internet to be like instant. So there was some trouble adjusting to that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely.
So
There's
yeah.
definitely limitations of the format. Like something we discussed when we were brainstorming ideas on what we could do for this virtual gallery. We were talking about how these 3D spaces, they lack the physicality, they lack the tangibility of being in a space, and it's something you can't even with virtual reality. Um, Still not quite the same, or it's not yet the same as being there in person, being there with someone else, and exploring a physical space. And so, yeah, we had to decide how we would present the works so that, uh, yeah, they could be experienced, and so that they could be experienced on devices, on computers, and also um, my last point was escaping. No,
Yeah,
I was just going to say that yeah, it has to be easy. It has to be something that people can click on and not just navigate away after seeing the thumbnail, right? They
yeah.
got to try it out. And that
I
was
think you
quite
used a
valuable.
really great term the first time around where you were like, oh, the thing with the virtual gallery is that we sacrifice use this phrase the spectacle, um, which I think is like perfect because the art going experience is so much the spectacle, or the observation of art is so much the spectacle. And yeah, you were talking about how do we keep people after they've clicked off Instagram and into this random website, how do we keep them there? How do we keep them engaged?
Right. Yeah.
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 And I think, yeah, a lot of media art is experiential. So people expect to have some kind of like sensation when experiencing like interactive art, not like classical art where it's a bit more introspective. So yeah, that's when kind of virtual or online exhibits can be more powerful. Like, if you're interacting with a thing that is normally very static, you feel a sensation, whereas maybe some other normal artworks might not translate so well through the web. So yeah, we were pretty keen to try the medium out, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys definitely took advantage of the medium's strength. Your meeting Hill is part of the aim is to bring people together, right? During a time where people are isolated from each other physically. So, the virtual space is perfect for that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like maybe this is a great launch point to start talking about all of our works and kind of what they mean and why we made them. But I know personally, like, I guess the idea that came out of Meeting Hill, or where with kind of the inspiration or the concept came from, was I think I was feeling a bit frustrated with. I've always had this thing about wanting to be able to share music and art together, and always had a boundary that I couldn't really break with music because I haven't really given it the time, and I'm a little bit intimidated by it. Uh, and in other ways, like, I was really getting into sharing music and sharing soundtracks and listening actively on Spotify through the feeds that were coming in. And I wanted to be able to like make an artwork that celebrated that. And I was sitting outside in my backyard, and I was like, it'd be so nice to be here with other people and to just like have a speaker somewhere. And then yeah, the idea of like Meeting Hill came around, and I think it's been interesting because at the start I was like, oh, I'd be a broadcast, and I'd love to broadcast kind of more consistently, and I feel like uh you know that was maybe a bit ambitious to be able to queue up music that was new and different, like that so much credit to radio stations to like have new music and keep content fresh the whole time, especially local stations. It's super impressive. But then having like Jordan's input and the way it kind of evolved was super super nice, and something that I totally am like stoked to see how it's come about and like what it became. Like I like Jordan, I want you to talk a little bit about this as well, but just the idea of like spreading the speakers around and having this spatial sound and then including the cables as well
Yeah,
added such an element.
yeah, it became very physical. Yeah, I guess it kind of turned into a bit of like a sound gallery, which is not really what we intended it to be. But as soon as you have positional audio that you can kind of explore, it changes the way you interact with it. And I remember on the opening night, particularly, a lot of people kind of like floating and stopping at each speaker, and I thought it was like kind of interesting if they were experiencing it like you would like a art gallery, but it was really just sounds. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's been I don't think you could even do that in a gallery because all the sounds are kind of shared in the space, whereas when you're in your headphones, it's very much localized. So that was kind of unexpected.
Yeah, and I think like if you provide headphones for people to listen to, even if you did try to do that, there's this weird sensation of like being immersed in it and then not being immersed in it. You're like putting on the headphones, you're listening to it, you don't really know when it starts and ends. You kind of just like give yourself the time that you think is like publicly appropriate, and then you
Yeah,
take them off and you kind of think you can just be like as loud as possible, or like you don't have any regulations to or anything that's encouraging you to listen to the next one. There's no
yeah,
audible pulls. It's just kind of like, oh look, more headphones over there, I go there.
yeah. Maybe that would be a good artwork, is having Bluetooth headphones and then tracking the person around the room and actually doing spatial audio like that, but you're still self-contained
That could be pretty cool.
in a real space. Yeah,
Yeah.
write that one down.
Doing
I
it
think
now.
that definitely touches on, yeah, what we're talking about, exploring the virtual spaces, and that again, I forgot what I was going to say, but no, it's interesting because your previous work, Pat, I noticed it's about capturing like the presence of being in a space, right? I'm thinking of the work that you did for your honors.
Oh yeah, regarding reality.
And I can see that in the other works that I saw at the first Origin uh, exhibition that you did at Good Space, and even in the concept and the execution for this idea. Creating spaces for people, right? Can you
Yeah,
talk a bit more about that?
yeah. I think there's something that I experienced growing up, uh, spending a lot of time online, which was this sense of, we talk about escapism in games, right? But there was this, I kind of hit this moment when I was in my early teens where I would always have the game open and be listening to the soundscape of like, the game that I was thinking of is Guild Wars. And you would be in these big ambient public spaces listening to this audio that's dynamic. And I use it as kind of like a meditative thing while I was doing my work. Or like I say meditative, it was basically just like quiet music to listen to and a soundscape. But as I got older, I started kind of engaging with that physically, and I started getting into camping, and I started, you know, appreciating like the trips that we went on when we were younger to certain places. Like we used to go skiing in winter and then to the beach in summer. And uh, I found similarities between the two and always saw the potential for the two and didn't know how to blend them. And so now my practice in the last couple of years has become using sensors and projectors and physical and digital elements and bringing them together to create these kind of like unique mixed reality spaces that offer a little bit of interaction, otherwise a physical feeling, maybe a bit of nostalgia, but always to serve the purpose of creating a space that you might imagine yourself in or that you feel immersed in.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's funny because originally it started as like concept art. I love doing digital painting. And I naturally found myself pushing towards using 3D technology because I wanted to be more and more involved in the painting and like get inside the places that I was drawing. But I always felt that like those spaces needed to be shared. I think VR can be a bit exclusive at times and it's hard to experience stuff together. And so Meeting Hill was kind of a nice alternative to that where it's like, well, I can see other people and I can chat to other people and we can listen to something together in the comfort of our own homes. And I guess that speaks back to games a little bit more, this work in particular. But the other thing that I had considered when we started this was like, I'd love to also have physical shows that are playing while Meeting Hill is playing online and, take some speakers out to the top of a hill somewhere and have sets if we weren't, restricted by like data and Australia's terrible internet and, could rally some people together uh, to have like a bunch of DJs playing and have a bit of a bush stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, it'd be so cool if this became a regular thing that we had an actual hill that we could go onto and play music out of, and then broadcast that to here and have people being there as well.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I find that like uh yeah, this piece, Meeting Hill, very much fits into like the canon of Patrick Eunice works, the complete work. Um, it kind of has this kind of beautiful merge between uh social, nostalgic, virtual and real, and then there's elements of like the sublime that you always tend to bring in as well. It's I feel like it's not as obvious within Meeting Hill because there's no massive figure until you think about the mountain as actually being this sort of sublime environment in
Hmm.
itself. Yeah. Could you speak more to maybe like the research behind it or influences? I mean, you've cited, yeah, was it Guild Wars?
Yeah, so
Uh,
there's a few artists that I think originally kind of inspired my interest in scale, and a few
mhm,
games as well that inspired my interest of scale. And I think, well, the combination of like being out in mountains and kind of longing for, you know, higher altitudes is one part of it. But then I found artists like Goya really did depict scale really well. There's a work called, and I think I don't know if I spoke about this to someone recently. It's called El Coloso, and it's basically like a giant that's walking through Spain, and people are just kind of like running away from it, but this giant's just like marching through. And there's a bunch of works that Goya has where there's these like two people fighting, or like against each other or wrestling, or a big object, and then it's in perspective of these like tiny hills. And I think we build architecture all the time and we're so used to building objects, but it's really rare that you see, apart from like mountains, we don't really have any giant organic matter. And it's really easy for humans to feel kind of big because we can put ourselves in high places. So, yeah, artists like Goya, I thought depicted that well. There's a game called Shadow of the Colossus, which also kind of gave you that sense of scale because you were scaling giants, and that was the whole experience of the game inside a big open environment.
right.
But then I guess uh, in the last few years, especially out of honors or during honors, I found Gibson and Martelli, who are a duo, I believe also a couple, who make mixed reality spaces that use physical objects. So they've got this one work that I'm thinking of in particular called Vermilion Lake, where they sawed off half of a boat, like a rowboat, and put it inside this small little fishing house that's in a gallery. So they built this little house inside the gallery, put the boat in the gallery, and then suspended from the roof inside this little fishing house is a projector. And projected on the screen is a lake that's inspired by one of the lakes like veins in Canada. And the whole
Yeah.
thing is that to navigate, you're rowing this boat, and it's a pretty big work. Like you can spend a good hour rowing down these streams, and while you're doing that, there are little lights that turn on and little sound cues that make you feel like you're being watched, and that you're kind of really, really small inside this really big lake. And I found that so inspiring. The fact that they could capture this sense of being in the center of a lake, and you're in a fishing house. Like you're in this tiny little. It's literally like 2.5 by 3.5 meters. It's not very big, but
Right.
because you're rowing in this boat and this screen is big enough, you just find that you get immersed in that. And so I think I'm always trying to look for ways in which you can kind of capture those little essences where people kind of lose themselves a little bit and go, huh, oh yeah, I'm like the thing with Meeting Hill that I found really interesting was that you know, seeing people around, I'd be excited to follow other people around in the space and kind of have these little conversations with motion, or see what other people were looking at, or see them walking around, and that kind of felt like a shared experience. And then I'd find that like even though we were restricted by the scale of the background physical file sizes,
Mhm.
it still kind of feels like you are at a high altitude, and the perspective made that work. And so sometimes you'll see people flying around and just staring out at the top of or out into the landscape. And that for me is that moment that I guess I try to capture, is this like feeling of looking at a grand vista or looking at something big and feeling a little bit small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, definitely. I think my favorite way of interacting in that art is like I kind of like to go off to the peak or like a little corner and just look out and listen to the wind. I just find it's really nice. I kind of miss that feeling of like being at the top of a mountain, getting to the top of a hike, being able to listen to that is just it's very immersive.
Yeah, recently I'd gone camping with some friends, and we did a hike. Well, it wasn't even a hike. It was kind of this like hidden marked trail up to the top of this mountain in Nuons, in just north of Lithgow. And this trail is literally marked with like white paint circles, but you're walking basically vertically up the top to the top of a mountain.
Wow.
And when we got up there, it just like immediately I knew what I wanted the top of Meeting Hill to feel like, and this was right before we really got stuck into it because Jordan and I were doing other work. And as soon as we got to the top, it was like I can see the tops of other mountains and cliffs around us, but it feels like you're looking over the edge and you're just seeing the rest of the world below you. And even though because we were on a plateau, you were kind of constantly looking still at this one plane, and then it felt like there was just a really big drop, which there was, but then like more cliffs or more mountains or something within the distance.
Right.
And so I think the like combination of the sound and even the music that Jordan produced, uh, which is like in all the speakers, I think it all adds to this element of like feeling like you're in some sort of vastness, and
Yeah.
the wind really adds to that.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask Jordan about that kind of because Patrick spoke at length about like yeah, this sort of spatialness to it. Jordan, how was your approach to the music, or how did that discussion between you and Patrick go? What kind of influences came into your own making when you were developing this work with Patrick?
I wanted to use. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah,
Hello. So, uh, I wanted to use sounds that were like calming and yeah, reflective of the environment. Um, there's a there's actually a track in there called Birds by Philip Glass.
Right.
And yeah, it's kind of just sets the tone. That's one of the first speakers that you can hear, and then the other speakers are kind of composed just like ambient sounds and bleeps and stuff that reflect where you are. Nothing too extreme. It's all very just mellow. And yeah, getting the balance of kind of which speaker is loudest, and obviously when you're in the circle, you're just hearing like what the main speakers are playing. But yeah, it's semi-functional as well. But yeah, just reflecting kind of Patrick's ideas on what the hill should be as much
And
as I could.
yeah, with the making of the music, you listed Philip Glass. Were there any other influences that come into like musicians or artists that come into your practice or influence you or inform this experience?
Not particularly. It was a bit last minute as well, but you know, I got some sounds in there. Yeah, maybe I'll write some more as well.
It's like you said, we're taking advantage of the medium. I remembered what I was going to say. I was going to say that I'm guilty of when I see headphones in galleries, not listening to them, or if I do listen to them, it'll only be for like 20 seconds, and which is probably not enough to hear everything that's coming out of them, right? But here in the virtual space, we've got how many channels? Is it 8-channel audio?
Yeah.
10 channels, something like that. That's something that's more complicated to replicate in real life, or more expensive.
Yeah, and at the moment, the audio's it's not hugely fleshed out, but the potential to like split the like stream into 8 kind of it would be a pretty awesome experience to live stream eight different channels. It'd just be as simple as getting it set up and like making sure the kind of delays and stuff were not going to be too much an issue. But yeah, having kind of virtual control over everything is pretty cool.
And that kind of excuse me, that kind of feeds into your idea for the upcoming parallel exhibition, right? The idea of being able to control the experience, being able to control the audio.
Yeah, I guess it's almost the opposite. Like we're trying to create a unified soundtrack in the physical space, whereas this is kind of creating. I guess it's kind of the same thing, but yeah, just making sure that the experience is cohesive, no matter where you are in the work.
Right. And Jordan, I know you got right down into the nitty gritty of the technical side of that work, and just curious if you'd like to share what were the toughest moments, what was the most difficult to figure out with the the code.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a web dev. Haven't really done it before, so I just approached it with my normal tactic of Googling what I wanted and then ripping apart whatever I could find and taking the bits that I wanted to use. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the fact that it works and that we can have lots of users interacting and that kind of stuff. Yeah, lots of learning different JavaScript libraries and how to set up all these different things, which I was lucky to have Callum and Jane helping out a lot as well with a few of the problems I ran into. But yeah, I'm always up for a challenge when it comes to new technology. So
well, certainly both Jen and I were monitoring the progress, and we were really impressed with what you were able to achieve in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, thanks. I guess.
Yeah, also with all the learning involved, that takes some time.
Yeah, I mean, we did get pretty busy in the few weeks before it was due, so maybe it was a bit rushed, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out.
I don't know if this is the right forum for it, but maybe you'd like to walk us through a couple of the libraries and what they do.
Yeah, I guess so. So 3JS obviously is the 3D library that kind of covers a lot of the visual stuff, including sound. Originally, I was going to use a sound library called Tone.js, which allows for generative JavaScript kind of music making, but got a bit out of time. But 3JS does have positional audio built in, which I utilized. And then Node.js and Socket.js are kind of the back end, which are super lightweight JavaScript libraries for multi-user stuff, which is pretty cool. And then a lot of setting up the server, which I used DigitalOcean, which is actually it's a paid service. So I was kind of lucky enough to just pay a few dollars. Actually, I haven't paid any dollars because we had a free trial for like 2 months. But
Nice.
yeah, it's just nice to have stuff that kind of works straight off the bat.
And we were running the radio station off that as well, right?
Yeah, Azuracast is the radio service which Callum spent a bit of time looking into. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you,
No
Callum.
worries. Yeah. So I was going to mention that if anyone listening is interested, well, where do you think is the best place to find out more about how to create works like ours?
Blockland.
Yeah, there was one particular tutorial which was very useful. So yeah, really Google's the best place. You just see what other people have done for you. Like 90% of the time, things will have already been done. So yeah, the easiest place to start.
That's how it happened with mine
Google.
as well. Because I think you, Callum, you were like, I was talking about, oh, I wish I could do all the body tracking stuff that I usually do with my other artworks in Unity and processing, but in the browser. And he was like, oh, just Google, I don't know, hand tracking into Google. Found out that there was a library for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, things happen like that.
The
What was
beauty of open source.
What was the term that you brought up, Jordan, about like it's like Google
Google Foo.
Google Foo.
Like, there needs to be some creative version of Google Foo. Can't remember the term we came up with. Something.
Yeah.
Basically knowing the right keywords to use, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And I guess you learn what looks right and what doesn't look right, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Shall we jump on to the next work? Is everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Callum, do you wanna talk about your work a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So, like we mentioned, we came across this Origin virtual opportunity because of isolation, because we had to be apart. Otherwise, we would have had it in the real gallery, which is still happening, of course. My work, which I had planned, is it's embedded hardware work, and so that wouldn't really translate so well to a virtual space, or so I thought. So I wanted to come up with something new. And I was at a bit of a loss for what to do when the idea was first pitched. But we had some brainstorming sessions, and we found some interesting things along the way. I think some of the things we found were the Porter Robinson Second Sky streamed performance, which also allowed people who visited the website to be present in a virtual space and also listen to the musical performances. And we also looked at things like Create or Die, they have live streams. They had a different approach to dealing with isolation, putting on live stream performances. And also, one of the ones that was quite instrumental to my work was Closed on Mondays, and it's an interesting case study for me. They have a 3D gallery space. It's accessible in the browser, on desktop and mobile, and it's very well performing, and it seems to be quite popular for showcasing traditional static art forms. And I've seen a few examples of this literal translation from, an in real life kind of um, gallery to virtual gallery space. I came up with a few. I had to think about where I'd seen them previously, and I remember even back in like grade one, we had a DK dinosaur CD-ROM where you could go into this museum and see like the dinosaurs as they were, or even playing Zelda Wind Waker, and there's a photo gallery at the end of the
Yes.
game where when you take photos and you can pin it up there, and you can walk around the gallery and look at your photos. Um, Fast forward, you've got even to the point of virtual reality galleries where you can go in and again see static pieces of work on the wall. And I had questions about um, how successful this this translation is that's been tried over and over again. So I thought, I'm going to try and maybe shake it up a bit, try to do something like that, but flip it on its head, or at least that was my intention. So the concept behind my work was to create a gallery space, which was created with as high fidelity as I could figure out how to do, um, and also not have any works of static art in the gallery. In fact, all the canvases would be blank, or they'd be like windows where the outside would be overexposed. You couldn't see anything. And the idea is that work would appear in between the canvases, projected on the walls or floating in space, um, and even bending physics, breaking physics, or things that wouldn't be possible in a real space, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, and so, yeah, I gave that a go. And especially something that I saw in the Closed on Mondays gallery is that they they haven't implemented a lot of lighting techniques. And now I've had a little bit of experience working as a lighting TD at Animal Logic, and I just thought, yeah, it's lacking in terms of the lighting quality. So what I did for my work with a lot of help from Jane is I baked global illumination lighting in Blender, and then took that into at first 3JS and then into Babylon.js, um, switching engines to try and get the best look and best performance, to try and make the gallery seem as much as possible, not just like a white walled cardboard box with no
Mhm.
lights. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
yeah. If there was anything I would want to improve with it, it's the number of works in there. I had a number of ideas for little sketches that just didn't get quite enough time to get to while maintaining the polish on the look of the gallery.
I think that speaks pretty truly to, I guess, what we concepted in the first place for Origin, right? Is that these are in some ways works of progress, and that we're kind of building something that could eventuate to something else, and that there's uh, that room for growth is a part of the process in the stuff that we make. So I think it's like a great attempt. You learnt I think you learnt so much, and you showed
Mm.
that you could provide so much to the online gallery experience, which I think is what is something that people are still really trying to figure out. So I think you achieved a great, I guess, at least first pass. If you don't think that it's where you wanted it to be, you know,
Oh,
I think
thanks.
it's great.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, I don't want to shame anyone else out there, but it's probably the best online gallery reconstruction I've seen.
Yeah.
It's definitely the most beautiful.
Oh, thanks. No,
But
it's thanks to a lot of help from Jane. Although I did learn a bit of modeling, but a lot of help from Jane, and she put up with me, even though I said, I want it to be exactly like Kudos here. I want to put in all these little details. I want the ridges on the doorknobs. Originally, the doorknobs were just spheres that were bronze colored, material colored, and I was like, I spent like 40 minutes taking the edges of a coin and then flattening them out, so you have those little ridges, and then putting it around the circumference, around the circumference of the doorknob, so it looked like a doorknob. And Jane was insisting, oh, no one's ever going to see that detail. And I was like, but I need it there for me to feel like it's there. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now.
It's probably pretty hard to see, actually.
Yeah, they are there though.
Yeah.
I did eventually put them in.
Yeah.
but I think those little touches are what brings the sense of immersion.
Mm.
Because when you enter the work, you're like, oh, that's Kudos. That really does feel like Kudos.
Mm.
So
It actually like kind of gave me an idea for what if we were ever to do another one of these. If we could like develop an Origin app, something that or like a piece of software that people could download that we could update, so that every time we have an online gallery, it could be like a Unity based piece of work and also like a mobile based work, or there was some sort of way in which we had kind of better control or more support technologically, like with the hardware that we have and the software that's available. I wonder if we will start to see a shift in services that go beyond web that people are more inclined to download, since people download apps anyway. And that, like, the gallery that you built kind of gave me that feeling. It was like you could put anything you wanted in this and it would be Kudos.
Right.
And you could just update it. It's similar to like closed on Mondays, but the process to put it all in, bake out the lighting again and bring those elements in, you've already got a perfect framework for something that could just constantly shift. And if people were willing to subscribe to that gallery, well, then it doesn't have to be on the browser. It could be anywhere if they're gonna visit it frequently enough.
Yeah, that's right.
it would be an excellent form of documentation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually maybe even I mean, of course, any of you or anyone really is welcome to use the model. Maybe it'd be useful for some COFA students planning works in Kudos. Not sure, but I think it'll come in handy having that model for the next work as well. Because
Yeah, totally.
I had intended that I wanted to create like a simulation. I have some lighting setups that I'm planning, and those lighting setups would require some light choreography, and it'd be great to try that out and see how it looks. Kind of create a little lighting designer in so I can utilize the gallery model for that. And it's all exactly the scale. I use the floor plans with the measurements.
Yeah.
And because I'm no good at modeling, I just did it to the exact measurements rather than eyeballing it in many cases. Although some things are removed, like the roof is a bit different. Some of the loft is gone as well. But yeah.
That's really
Cool.
good. Yeah.
Thank you for your insights.
I think the reflections really sell it, which is thanks to switching from 3JS to Babylon JS.
What a
Something that
find.
was done really late on.
Yes.
Found out too late. Yeah.
But it turned out well. Yeah.
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 The interesting bug you might spot is that the reflections only work on one diagonal axis. So some corners of the gallery have no reflections on the floor, and some do.
Oh wow.
Another small detail you might notice, if you're careful enough, is there's also a scratch map on the floor. So on top of the reflections, there's scratches that go along the grain of the wood,
Yeah.
Wow.
I
like
did
the
notice
dots, and their reflectivity will be reduced because
Yeah.
it's scratched.
I did notice that. That was like such a nice detail.
Hmm.
Although I
Mm.
wonder if that's like maybe that's like a 3D person detail. That's like,
Yeah, a lot of effort to include for maybe no one will notice, but hopefully my hope is that it helps to sell the
oh yeah, it definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah, subconsciously you'll notice.
It adds that layer of like materiality.
Oh, even the other day, Kudos shared your work on their Instagram, and I thought it was an image of the gallery. I was like,
wow.
for a second, I was like, wait, that's Callum's work, but it took me a second because your brain just like doesn't. There's a threshold, right, where your brain goes, oh yeah, that's that thing. And if you don't know, like, I've been playing The Last of Us 2 recently, and there are so many elements in that game where they've, with the help of like post processing and a bit of noise and the right lighting and accurate like subsurface scattering on skin, it would totally sell as a movie. And if you brought someone in to have a look at the screen, they would also be convinced it's a movie. Like, if you look in detail, you'll start to notice maybe it's not as realistic, but there's a threshold where we stop, where we suspend that disbelief, and I think those little details contribute to meeting that threshold. Like the scratch marks or the way the lighting is baked, and just that kind of fuzziness that's on the walls that feels like paint. There's just these tiny little details, but you guys totally killed it. Like,
Thanks.
it
Thanks.
looks incredible.
Yeah. I think these details are like absolutely necessary when most of the model is just white, right? Just white walls. You need to
Yeah.
have, if you're gonna sell, 4 white walls, you have to do something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And people,
Yeah.
it's funny, like when you talk about 3D spaces, it's actually harder to make work that feels empty. It's harder to make a desert in 3D because it almost feels too bare, you know?
Right.
Like, you need to, when you're building a forest, there's a lot of visual noise. You can just kind of put whatever you want in the around you, and it feels dense because your field of view is limited by the couple objects and the detail of those objects in front of you. But when you're working with blank spaces, literally cubes, you know, those little subtle details go such a long way. And to see that on web and see it run so smoothly as well is like proof that like interior design and kind of online galleries can be better than what they are now, which speaks exactly to origin and kind of the ethos of the stuff that we do.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the polish of it, at least. Yeah, something that I think is a fun mental exercise is thinking, what if we took this work, or what if we took this visual and brought it back 10, 20 years and showed it to people? What would people think? What would people think 20 years ago if they saw The Last of Us 2 graphics? And back then, you have like, you ever see the Blade movie, the number one, Blade number one? And in the final climax of the film, they have these skeleton vampire things that rise up and fly around the ceiling, and the shading is like flat, absolutely flat, and it looks terrible. Like but
Yeah.
people still bought it. That was in a a blockbuster movie. So what if we brought this stuff back then? What would people's response be?
Yeah, and that when the Unreal 5 demo came out, I was like, this looks photorealistic, and it does. But I wonder what Unreal 5 at the end of its life cycle is going to look like. And just how much more detail is going to be in there that maybe we didn't consider prior. Because right now I feel like we're getting pretty close to photorealism, that works really strongly. And yet there's probably still stuff that raises our standard and makes us look at that in 15 years' time and be like, yeah, but X, Y, and Z doesn't look that great.
I think as soon as you start watching it in motion, as soon as you start seeing animations, that's where the human eye can really pick apart
Yeah,
Yeah.
fake from the real.
yeah, totally. Awesome. All right, shall we move on? Jane, would you like to talk about your work?
Yeah, sure. So I guess what my reasoning with cybermancy was, actually um I came up with the concept with the help of Callum. I kind of had some common themes in my past work. So I've done past work with AI. So I had one particular work where I actually retrained a neural net that recognizes common household objects into one that detects faces and tries to assign personalities for it.
Huh.
And I was trying to explore the idea of bias, and I guess it's quite topical now because I read about how a less advanced AI was being used in the American justice system to try and figure out the likelihood of reoffenders showing up again in court. And
Oh, wow.
what they found out, because the data was biased, that they overestimated black men to reoffend and underestimated white men to reoffend.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh,
And like in a similar vein, Google Images, when it first launched, had this very, I guess, yeah, it had a pretty awful, bad PR incident where black people were being automatically tagged as gorillas.
Oh,
Oh.
So,
no.
based on these two incidents, I was like, the two common things with these two AIs was that human bias in the data was introduced, and then the AI learnt our bias. So I thought, I'll try this thing where I will try and make a biased AI, and I found out that it's actually very hard. At least with 3 hours of training and 300 photos, I was not able to introduce any bias to the AI.
Right.
So you'd have to wonder how flawed our own judgments are in order to create such things like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was one particular theme happening with my past work. The other major thing that's happening with my work is um, more aesthetics, um, less political, I guess, which is like doing stuff with body tracking and making nice, pretty visuals to go with it.
Mm.
And the motivation for that is I wasn't satisfied with screen based interactions like screen, keyboard, and mouse specifically, because all of these are interfaces that get in the way of experience. And if you could just use your body, um, the I guess the learning curve, and also the closeness to the artwork is significantly reduced with all of this out of the way. So then smash those two things together, and you've got cybermancy. So you've got the hand tracking, which is like the body stuff that I was really interested in before. You've got AI and profiling, which is like continuation of that other work. So I created a sort of in-browser AI palm reader, which would read from your face, although it didn't tell you your age and your gender, and then suggest content based on that. And the content was like things that sound vaguely like life advice, but then they had a lot of product placement attached to them. I
Mm.
created all these fake brands. These brands were also AI generated, down to the actual visuals and icons and everything.
Oh, really?
Yes, they were.
What?
Yeah, so, and the only thing written by me was the text content and the code. That was it. All of it is by
Wow.
myself.
I
Yeah.
had no idea.
That's crazy.
That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Jane showed me that AI logo maker, which is going to put many people out of business.
Yeah, I didn't feel good about that because, and there's multiple of these brand or logo makers where they're like, oh, sick of paying designers hundreds or like waiting for weeks of turnaround time, and I'm like, this is awful. Designers are people too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I feel
Yeah.
about Canva, though, right? Like, they're like, oh, just give these tools to people. And that's fine. But then it puts designers out of work because it's like, oh, well, I can just make a logo on Canva and I don't need a graphic designer anymore.
People doing that?
Yeah. I've got a friend who works, I won't say where, uh, but they basically fired their graphic designer because she could
Wow.
just make stuff on Canva.
There's many corporate entities that are now reducing their creative departments because they're no longer needed.
Yeah.
I would have thought that. I mean, as great as Canva is, I would have thought desktop software already existed that could do similar.
Yeah, I think it's just that it's that because we live in an age that's kind of it's the catalog era where we don't look for things that help us make tools. We just look for the thing that has the thing that we already want.
Hmm.
Canva is
Yeah.
like web based and already has that stuff on there. And you can just like, oh yeah, I pick this, I do this. You don't have to like create it. The creativity is not involved. It's just
Yeah.
that it's there and you can use it.
I guess there's no doubt that it's viable because I saw just the other day that they've closed a new funding round and now have a $6 billion valuation.
Yep.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's ridiculous. It's for an Australian company too.
Mm.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Things do happen in Australia, it seems. But yeah,
But bringing it back to your work.
Yeah.
I remember when we were talking over the initial concepts, we were thinking, what kind of things can we, what kind of knowledge can we glean from a user to inform these palm readings, and we can pretend that it's the palm, but it's actually all these other things, right?
Yep.
I remember you were super worried about people's privacy, not wanting to read like all their browser cookies and
Yep.
see.
I did try though.
Yeah, because with the APIs like Google, what is it?
Google Analytics.
Yeah, Google Analytics,
Well,
and some other APIs, right? You can see
they weren't powerful enough because,
Right.
interestingly enough, with Google Analytics, although they have personalized data and they can fingerprint you very well, if you use their Google Analytics product, it's all kind of like, how do you say,
Anonymized, yeah.
They just aggregate. They're like, oh yeah, we saw 5 people that were 40 to 50 year range. But I actually wanted a
Specific
targeted
person, yeah.
experience, not
Yeah.
guessing. So yeah, Callum suggested, hey, I bet there is a face AI of some kind that could do such a thing, and I googled it and I found it.
Yeah.
But I guess this only saving grace is that all of that data, like all the calculations of your demographic, are done locally on that page, and then once you leave that page, all that data is discarded. So that's probably as ethical as I could be.
Yeah, awesome.
I mean, from my point of view, I mean, if it was me, I'm not concerned with the ethics, because if your work is successful enough that people are complaining about the efficacy of it, then it's already successful. It's a good
Well,
problem to have,
Right.
Well, I mean, like,
and you're not doing it with nefarious purposes.
Yeah, but like people were already, like, Deb was worried. She was like, how did people know and know this thing? I want to get that effect, but without actually
Stepping over the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this funny side to you, Jane, which is like you make these incredibly beautiful pieces of work, but I definitely don't want to mess with you. I'm scared
You're
of
a,
capacity.
she's a cybermancer.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, people would call you a witch.
You're a tech
Code
witch.
witch.
Read
Yeah,
that.
I'm claiming that as my new job title.
Code witch. I love that.
Imagine if we brought this piece of work back 20 years.
Yeah.
God.
People would think about it. Where people didn't even know about machine learning and neural nets and
Monty
AI.
Python-esque.
Mm.
The great thing is that the most hilarious thing was that there was a brief lull in neural net and machine learning research because they sort of bank on the concept of emergence, where like you've got multiple units doing something, computing something really dumb, and then you scale it to like tens of thousands, and somehow they can come up with a really complex decision. So like in the 80s and 90s, research pretty much stopped in this area because some famous computer scientist guy was like, this won't get anywhere, waste of time. And then the 2000s, it really picked up, and this neural net research just exploded. And now it just does everything, even from like the stuff I mentioned to even trying to do computer graphics, like try and imagine what a liquid simulation would look like without actually doing the liquid simulation. Crazy things
Yeah.
like
And material synthesis. Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy how far we've come.
Yeah, this is like the past decade only, so
And that's the testament to energy put into a concept, right? Like just enough people working on something can produce absolutely incredible results, and it feeds into itself and evolves itself. And like even with the work that you're doing, Jane, I think you, and as kind of Alvin mentioned, you bring this really beautiful kind of introspective or look into this technology in a way that's digestible and in a way that can show people what the like potential, and in a way that's kind of fun. And I think when people think of technology, particularly like older generations and people who don't really know much about tech, are very intimidated by it, and even the concept of like data and data retention and privacy, all of these things often are scary terms to people. And obviously like privacy is important, but the data that's being collected doesn't have to be misused. There could be really fun and positive things that come out of the data collection that we gain, or that we give when we have all these different pages and accounts for things. And I think you bring a really great conversation around like the use of that data, and that like that's really interesting and inspiring. It's
thanks.
it's I don't know, it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, there's very much a data is beautiful aspect when we observe your works. Is
Yeah.
deceptively so. Like it always hides the complexity of the system that you've made behind it.
And then all anybody has to do is ask you. It's not like you're willing to. It's not like you're trying to hide it either. You just, like all anybody has to do is just press that question, and you'll tell them because it's theirs, right? Like it's their face, it's their data, and all they got to do is ask about it and how it and what you used to create this. And most people aren't. I've never heard anybody be angry at your work. So
I think it touches on something that Jane definitely likes to bring up about how the things that we don't understand or anything that's sufficiently complicated, we can attribute to magic.
yeah.
And that's part of the theme of this work, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because we've got a long tradition of reading fortunes because people just want to know more about themselves in the future, right? And the line between sort of like privacy that's invasive and also convenience is basically based on your ego, right? Because like
Yeah.
if it's doing things that you want and praising you or whatnot, then people are not upset too much about it. But then if it crosses the line and you feel like you're being manipulated or whatnot, then people get really angry, like with Cambridge Analytica, I guess.
Mm.
So I was, and yeah, it's only, I think there's a degree of vanity involved regarding whether or not people think data is being used properly or misused.
Oh yeah, I mean, even just recently, the conversations around TikTok, you know, I'm not certain. I'm pretty. I feel
Patrick
pretty.
loves TikTok.
Oh,
Oh no, I don't. This there's this, I don't know how true this post is, but I've seen more and more people talk about it, and it's a list of stuff. This guy basically like reverse engineered the app, and a bunch of people kind of did the same methods and found the same results. And basically just found all of the data that's being skimmed from that app, which is basically designed as clickbait originally, that just got popular. And I hear people defending, deleting that app when especially with this news coming out, that it's like it's blatant theft. They're taking people's IPs, they're taking people's faces because it's video, uh, and
they're taking people's clipboards.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
When you open the app on iOS, it takes whatever you got in the clipboards, whatever password you might have copied,
it's
Really?
whatever
yeah,
email,
What?
and it saves it. Yep.
and yet
Oh my
people
God.
people are defending it, and they're also those same people are mad about the COVID app, right? Like they don't want to download it. They had 17 of like Australia's best security team working on making the data secure on that app.
Also, they claim.
Also, they claim, I've heard people run through it, and they had like a team of hackers go through it, and no one could really find any significant holes.
But at the same time, it hasn't
been tracking properly.
it hasn't tracked a single positive case for iOS users.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because it just doesn't work on iOS.
yeah,
You can't enable the Bluetooth while the app is not open.
yeah. They fully did a test where it's like they were looking at the app speaking to the other phones, and the success rate was abysmal.
Yeah. Even then, I'd be more inclined to trust a government app than TikTok. And going back to this whole like vanity thing, because TikTok is this like positive, fun tool where you can upload videos with friends and view other people's content, people are less inclined to scrutinize it. But when it comes to government, they immediately are on the defense, which is like,
Fair.
rightly so in some ways. But
But
like,
you should adapt that mentality towards everything,
exactly.
not just things that are sparkly and make nice noises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that contact tracing is actually a viable, something that could have been useful. Although it is, giving up some data. If implemented correctly, like if the government had just used Google's or Apple's contact tracing SDK, which they released, for anyone to use,
Mhm.
instead of trying to develop their own, which didn't work, then we could have a successful app that's actually useful.
Yeah.
The problem with TikTok is that the target audience, teenagers, right? A lot of them don't even care about what's happening with their data. Maybe they don't know, or maybe if they do know, that's a price they're happy to pay to use the app.
It might not be limited to teenagers, because like going back to Cambridge Analytica, the most worrying case is like Facebook, YouTube, Google ranking information to be higher when they know it's most relevant to the things that you typically consume. And that's dangerous if you keep on consuming the opinion that you've had sort of all your life, and you're not, being challenged or seeing anything outside of it. You sort of fall into false sense of security of thinking that you're right because of that confirmation bias.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
probably the most dangerous.
You're trapped in your bubble.
Yeah.
I think
That's
it's
why-
good normally with your work as well that it kind of looks into the intense pseudoscience of palm reading and like astronomy as well, because we're seeing this surge of young people who engage in it as well more and more.
Yeah.
It,
confirmation bias.
seeing the
Yeah.
snowball effect of misinformation or
Mm.
like just like post-truthness.
Yeah,
It's really concerning.
it's funny because my sister actually has astrology app and she half follows and half not. I'm not sure. Maybe she's ironically consuming it, but she was like, "Oh, if this works, this would actually be a great astrology type of
Is it
app."
CoStar?
Yeah,
Yeah. But this is
CoStar,
the thing.
it's
Okay.
so aesthetic as well, so like people buy into it.
I don't understand the religious scrutiny paired with the like belief in astrology. You know, there are so many people who are like, "Oh, that couldn't exist," but also star signs, right? I'm like, none of this makes sense.
Mm.
uh,
Yeah, it's
With anything, people pick and choose what they want to believe in.
of
exactly.
course, of course.
People also they project meaning onto suggestions, right?
yeah. So I also did a bit of research into psychology. Came across an effect called the Barnum effect, and it was pretty incredible. It's like there is a way to construct statements and pass it off as personalized um, if you like fulfill certain criteria. And the guy who started it was a psychology professor. He wrote down 13 statements that sounded kind of vague but possibly specific, like it could apply to you.
Right.
And he gave it to all his students and said, "I've written a personalized report on you," and 80% of them said it was accurate.
Oh man, there you go.
Yeah, so it's pretty entertaining, but watch out for
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah.
You can just cold read people, and they will think it's correct.
I mean, that's what fortune tellers do, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Or
that's
magicians, illusionists.
right.
All right, mentalists. On that note,
Right.
I think we should go to the king of comfort.
Yeah, waiting,
Let's-
patiently waiting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. On
Alman.
the other spectrum, instead of making you feel queasy. Yeah. What do you want to know?
Just to give us a bit of a background as to the stuff that you make and why you enjoy making it, and why you made this work, and what was the
And how it
inspiration.
how the idea evolved, if it did, from what you were planning to do in the
Yeah.
physical space.
Definitely Long Way Home was definitely a flow on of what I was initially planning for the physical exhibition. But basically, I kind of think of it also like in the succession of works. Uh, it does take some elements from what I've made before, and there are some elements that are maybe more reactionary as well. The first being Long Way Home. The artwork itself is obviously an airplane simulation, um, which kind of touches on ideas of comfort. And the first theme that kind of carries across that was uh, present in previous works is the concept of transit or wayfinding. This kind of way of directing yourself. Um, that was one element I was really fixated on because I kind of uh, enjoy looking at this narrative of the journey. Um, and I think initially before I was constantly looking at like how the journey shapes you. With this piece, I'm kind of looking more specifically at the state of mind that you are on when you're in the journey or you're arriving at the destination. I kind of attribute that also slightly as a play off of Pat's work or Pat's influence as well, because I see your work always kind of looks at this destination.
Mm.
It's really informed by place. I think my work kind of plays off. It kind of looks at the state of transit in between, almost.
Right.
And I think the comfort aspect of it is kind of like this reactionary um, approach because previously a lot of my work was kind of looking at the nostalgia of the rave scene and kind of like the harshness um, the threatening imagery that kind of comes with it. There's this kind of element of danger or ruggedness that is associated with rave culture. And I think once I had kind of uh, moved in that area, the next area to move on to was to go to the complete opposite direction, where it's like we have this place that is like really obsessed with like rebellion and subversion and utopia and being against the rules. It can be quite dark and quite scary, um, quite angry, quite masculine. And then on the flip side, you have these things that are really comfortable and feminine in some aspects and relaxing to look like and provide a greater sense of security or relaxation. So I think that's where I kind of took influence, and then I was interested in how that particular feeling of comfort manifests itself specifically when you're traveling or you're in a state of transit.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
I I think I also like I deconstructed it a bit more afterwards after making this work, and I was kind of interested in like the idea of um do you remember Sydney Trains or City Rail used to have those ads that was like um the best trip is the one that you forget,
Yeah.
that was on their trains. And I was like, yeah, like when you're in your home country, the best train trip is the one where you're not really absorbing or like your your time spent in the space of transit is not one of disruption. It's like the most forgetful one, the most mundane one, the one where nothing happens and everything is secure.
Mm.
But then you kind of offset that with a trip or the experience of transit when you're in a different country, and that would actually be a pretty bad experience of transit. You want your experience of traveling from one place to another to be memorable. You want to soak up the environment. Um, so I kind of became interested in the immersion or the sensory experiences of traveling, what kind of creates this differentiation in comfort or what makes a good experience. And yeah, the state of mind where you're kind of passive and observing, background passing over you, it's almost washing over you.
Hmm. Super cool. I guess I'm like curious about what what moments, particularly in recent trips, made you feel that way that you kind of call upon to create this work. Obviously, like a plane ride is very obvious, but like were there any kind of moments? I know recently you went to Japan. Were there any moments in Japan that really made you feel that sense of
Yeah,
kind of like awareness of the
yeah,
trip that you were on, that comfort?
definitely. The biggest one was definitely taking the oh, we took a train from I'm trying to think. I think it was we took a train from Osaka all the way to Nara,
Hmm.
and we didn't pay extra to get any express train. So we took a really slow train
Mm.
really early in the morning, and I could see the snow piling up, and then the scenery sort of changing over time. It would become more. It went from like a city to a town to the suburbs to like countryside, um, and then also the experience of going back to Osaka and just the difference in the time of day really affected your state of mind or the sensory experience,
Hmm.
um, or your enjoyment, how your observership, your willingness to look outside the window to consume. Um, I think that was a really big informant. Uh, and yeah, plane rides are another big thing. A huge thing about traveling is I hate red-eye flights. I can't stand overnight flights. I think they're the worst
Mm.
because, like, with an overnight flight, you're supposed to be sleeping, and the plane is the last place you want to be. when you, you want to sleep. It's the most uncomfortable configuration you could possibly be in. Um,
Yeah. There's
so
so many movies to watch. How
yeah,
could you sleep?
I think basically like when you're on a night flight, I kind of like sacrifice the idea of even sleeping, and I think that is also like a interesting state of mind to be in. It's just like a really interesting state. I also think like a really big part of why I'm really interested in this kind of in transportation and observation and the calming effect it has is just the actual aesthetics of it. Um, like the the sliding landscape, the parallax is really hypnotic.
Mm.
Yeah, and I was trying to during the early stages of this work and towards the end, I hand painted the assets,
Right.
um, which were the backgrounds mainly, the scrolling, repeating backgrounds,
Mhm.
which were inspired by Ghibli works.
Mm.
Um, and I was looking into thinking about why particular Ghibli works have such a calming effect. And I found that there's actually a relationship between uh, this kind of parallax of frames and the sliding imagery and the composition of uh, Hayao Miyazaki's films, these Ghibli films. Um,
Yeah,
be-
I think there's
other,
like a there's like a there's a lot of establishing shots within Miyazaki's content
yeah,
that creates like a sense of place even though you're not there and even though the character isn't walking through that specific shot. There's like shots of a cafe, shots of a of a bunch of streets, and it establishes all these senses of place, but not in a state of like array or disarray. It's
no,
always in this like slow, calming,
yeah,
gentle. Yeah.
um, and that actually has to do a lot with like the actual practicality of the effects.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was listening to this audiobook by Ton Lemaire. He's from the McGill University in Montreal. Book's called Anime Machine, and it kind of talks about media theory in specifically regarding anime. Um, and the term anime refers to animatics, actually, as opposed to animation.
Mm.
Um, it, which is actually like the physical method in which multiplanar image and multiplanar cameras move to create movement.
Oh, I
They
didn't know that.
create zoom-in effects and like scrolling effects. And Miyazaki is someone who employed this particular like animatics and the sliding perspective really well because one, it was economical to do so, and two, he's someone who kind of used this to a greater effect because anime was mostly for TV, but then Miyazaki was someone who turned it into something that was much more cinematic, and he did that with thematizing animatics, and then he also would kind of weaponize depth.
Hmm.
And when he uses depth, particularly in Princess Mononoke, it's kind of used to illustrate uh, the negative impacts of technocracy. Like
Huh.
all of the depth shots of like planes flying out. Sorry, that's in Laputa.
Yep.
Sorry, but in Mononoke, the depth shots are used against arrows shooting or like guns firing. So
Mm.
there's this real sense of direct impact or like a different frame of view, where all the frames that are calming and established ones that use this kind of slow sliding parallax to create a sense of calm.
Mm.
Yeah, and so this exploded projection was management of arrays that fights against a Cartesian mindset was something that I wanted to latch onto. I don't know if I did it successfully. I probably would have liked to work on it a bit more, but it's definitely a stepping stone in that direction.
I thought it was very polished. I've seen that you've done some work with the cinemagraph format before. Do you
Yeah,
think it has is this connected to what we're talking about here?
yeah, definitely. I think it also kind of that cinemagraph, uh, that looping animation effect also relates back to a real major source of inspiration, which was the lo-fi hip hop channel, because
Mm.
it has that looping cinematograph of the girl studying.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think they're like a really interesting format because you can kind of just look it into them and get a bit lost.
Yeah, there are some artists that make some really elaborate cinegraphs, and it's like a whole restaurant scene, and there's animations happening in all of them, and you're watching just a loop of 12, 13, maybe a bit more, 20, 30 frames, but like the journey that happens within it, the stuff that's being passed around. There's one I should really find it on Twitter, um, of like a ramen shop, and there's someone behind the counter dishing ramen, and there's a person you know, handing a bowl with one hand while they're picking up one from the other, and then there's someone eating it up and throwing it onto the table that lands in the sink. And while that's happening, there's people talking in the background, and someone spills something, and that gets cleaned up by someone on the floor. And there's just all of these little elements. You can spend 5 minutes looking at it, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
not looking at the first thing. You're like, everything you're looking at is new.
yeah, definitely. You're constantly moving across,
Yeah.
just all the little details.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
And
I
uncovering the story.
yeah. I also, I kind of like that format because you guys know my working style, and it's someone I really struggle to commit to long projects because I can't sustain a lot interest for very long. I kind of like things to be done very quickly, so I kind of tend to work on a small scale. So I think the kind of abuse maybe is not the right word, but the use of animatics and the sliding projection, the this kind of management of arrays, really boiled down to also being economical as well.
Mm.
In which case, I really have to thank Jane. 'Cause, yeah, I also was keeping in mind, oh, I really want the workload for this work to be quite small because she was handling the bulk of um, the website, really. So yeah, I think that's a consideration that I also have to describe when discussing the making or the research behind it.
Mhm.
Mm. And I think this the economy you mentioned is it's not something to be understated. Like you just
No,
have to
yeah,
take a look at your portfolio and see like the huge amount of works that you've created, that you're able to create, and I have enormous respect for that. Being able to just make something every day, or sit down and make something in just a few sittings. Uh, yeah, that's amazing to me.
Yeah, I was really impressed watching that model form just on that one weekend, or actually 2 weekends you were there. I was like, damn, that's fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
watching you construct those things so quickly. It's
thank
that's an
you.
art in itself.
Yeah, I'm very lucky in the sense that I really honed in on what I like about 3D, which is modeling, and then I kind of stopped paying attention to everything else.
Hmm.
'Cause, yeah, if you ask me to animate something, I'll be like, sure, maybe. We'll see." Can't someone
Cynical.
else do it? I like, simple animations, scrolling things, I'm good.
Mm. But not just modeling. It's your materials and texturing. It's and it's not just 3D work that's on. I've seen your portfolio is full of all sorts of things. So many different drawing styles. So many different motion graphics.
Yeah, thank you.
Truly a jack of all
Kni-
trades.
Knives and guns at one point.
Mm.
Yeah,
You
the
used to be badass.
You know, it's so funny because my friends are always inviting me out to stuff, and I'm like, no, I'm not interested. I'd rather stay at home. And they all go, ah, what happened to the old Alvin? What happened to the Alvin that used to rave, that used to party? And I'm like, I'm sorry. I like trains now. I like trains as well.
Well, I think
Nice.
it's
Awesome,
something
guys.
that has worked out really well with the works that everybody's produced. We have the somewhat common theme mostly, and that is everything is pretty chill. Everything, all our works, like you can, from lo-fi hip hop, airplane to on a meeting hill, even a palm reading in the traditional sense is a sort of hypnotic kind of meditative experience, even if
Yeah.
it's got a certain cyberpunk bent in this case. But I think we've all grasped this common theme of being in a calm, relaxed,
Yeah.
and chill kind of state.
I think I was gonna say I felt like a common theme that maybe is not the most obvious is maybe like the sense of yearning.
Mm.
I think like in your work, Callum, there's obviously a sense to like there's a desire to return or replicate the experience of going to a gallery almost.
Hmm.
And then in Patrick's and Jordan's work, you have this sense of yearning to return to a place where socialization was possible. These kind of experiences of bountiful nature weren't so fraught. Um, and even in Jane's work, I think uh, there's this slight hopefulness to the palm reading, or kind of almost like maybe maybe I wish you could return to the place where technology wasn't so scary and it was
Where there wasn't so much capitalist cynicism.
yeah,
Yeah.
when things just weren't so dark.
Yeah, I love that though.
Yeah, I think we all definitely came to virtual uh, naturally, if not out of necessity, but
Yeah.
quite naturally.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see how it changes when we're back in the physical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's going to be positive experience.
off the hook, if anything.
I'm, you know what, like I really have to say thank you to everybody in this team because I think more than anything else, what personally being a part of Origin has done is show me that there have been people who share a vision that I have and who are willing to support me as much as I feel like I'm willing to support other people in getting something done that makes a difference. You know, like I guess for the longest time I was like, how am I going to do this on my own? Because I don't know anybody who feels the same way I do about media arts or about certain things. And being a part of Origin has been so special because, like, I, to be able to turn to any of you guys and just get some help and bounce an idea and, to be able to come to a conclusion that feels better together. I don't think I could have done any of this without the help of Jordan and Jane and Alvin, Callum. Like you guys, everybody has contributed in a way that just makes being a part of this even more special. And yeah, no, I'm like so excited for Parallels and for what's
Yeah.
to come. It's just super
Absolutely.
cool.
Yeah.
Despite
for
our
sure.
isolation, I think we've we've come together and help each other out and really make it a collective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
All right.
Nice.
I think,
Positive note.
yeah, I think that's good to finish off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
right.
Cool. Nice
When
one, guys.
pick us next, Patrick?
I believe next Callum is gonna be doing a set, right? Callum
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Saturday,
4th of July.
Yep. 4th of July.
4th of July, setting us off
Yep.
with Independence Day bang.
I have some thematic tunes.
Awesome.
Are you going to do a set, Pat?
Maybe.
Should. You should.
I might. Maybe tomorrow night. We'll see what happens.
Sounds good.
Um.
And maybe Jordan is interested too.
Well, Jordan,
Maybe next
are
week.
you Sunday?
This Sunday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
5th?
We'll see. Is that the 5th?
Yeah.
We'll make it happen.
We'll see how it goes.
All
Yeah.
right.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for hosting.
Hopefully, yeah, we'll speak soon. And thanks to the listeners for listening. All right, everybody.
Alright.
See you later.
Bye.
Yeah.